Hi everyone, I'm Ayya Yeshe. Welcome to Bodhicitta Dakini Monastery online Dharma teachings. I hope you're all well. This is really the first time in many months I've made a Dharma talk. I've been extremely busy actualizing my lifelong dream of starting a monastery for Western and non-Himalayan monastics. And finally, this dream, after 21 years as a nun, has come to fruition, so I can't express my joy enough. Many of you know I struggled for many years just getting enough financial support to survive. And I was often housing insecure, living in garden sheds and on my mother's lounge and in cars and in an Indian slum. So I feel incredibly fortunate to now be in the beautiful UNESCO protected World Heritage Area of Tasmania, which is the little island down the bottom of Australia. Next stop, Antarctica. It's such a beautiful, lush area in northern Tasmania where, surrounded by mountains, it's like a natural cathedral. We have 40 acres, and this became possible because my mother, some friends, and saving long term, we were able to get enough to pool these resources and to buy a small fibro 3-bedroom house with 40 acres and a few shacks. But it's a truly beautiful piece of land, incredibly conducive for meditation. So I've been busy painting and doing paperwork and meeting people in the local community, traveling. For a few months I was traveling around Tasmania looking for land and different properties, and the price of land here is cheaper than most places in Australia, but it's going up and up every year, more drastically than other places. But it's ideal for climate change because it's in a cooler area. And the place where I live, it has a good rainfall. So we're incredibly fortunate, and it's just the energy here is so nice. Beautiful place to meditate. So I feel so fortunate, and thank you to everyone who donated to our online Facebook fundraiser. And you can support our monastery. We really need assistance in an ongoing way, and you're always welcome to visit, to come online or come in person for Dharma talks. Hopefully this will be more easy once COVID ends. And people who are serious about ordaining are also welcome to come and spend some time and see if it's suitable to them. But we are small, so and also our income is quite limited. The annual support of our monastery is 25,000 Australian dollars, which is not really even minimum wage for one Australian. But where there's a will, there's a way. So hopefully as more people come, there'll be more support. And at least, our online Sangha can also give people support while they're still in lockdown or just far away in a busy life. So anyway, today I thought I'd talk about self-love, healthy self-love, not narcissism, because they're very different, and self-acceptance, because this seems to be something that many people struggle with. And maybe it's because of shame in early childhood. Maybe we weren't loved enough. We live in a world where the parameters of our identity are constantly changing. Even careers are not secure anymore. It's the gig economy. Everybody changes jobs, changes partners. Everything is moving so fast. It's hard to find a center of who you are. And we also live in a society where lots of messages are given to us from a very young age. We live in a complex world. Messages are given to us, certainly as women, about how we should look, how much we should weigh, what race is most beautiful. We live with systemic racism, systemic sexism, gender inequality, and the downward spiral of capitalism. A lot of people are not able to afford rent or buy a house anymore. So it's just a growing time. And, you know, there's polarization and a lot of misinformation in the world. So, an autocracy, growing kind of autocracy. So more and more there's insecurity. And this can also exacerbate our anxiety and lack of self-love. But rather than talk about all those problems today, I'd like to just zone in more on what like a lack of self-love is, and what we can do to work with that. So what I'm not a qualified psychologist, so nothing I'm saying is better than therapy. Therapy is with a supportive therapist is always a good idea, especially if you have serious mental health issues. But I'm just offering my own experience as a simple Buddhist nun. So what is self-love as opposed to what is, you know, because in Buddhism we always talk about get rid of your ego, don't be egotistical, there is no self. And this message can be really confusing to people who are struggling with low self-esteem. And it can also produce spiritual bypassing or people shaming you for having emotions, having feelings, having needs. And especially sometimes when we hear the Bodhisattva teachings like, you know, as long as space remains, as long as there are those who suffer, may I too remain to remove the darkness of the world. All the joy the world contains, it has come through cherishing others. All the misery the world contains has come through cherishing only myself. You know, give up cherishing yourself. These kind of, we can really take these Mahayana teachings on bodhicitta and misinterpret them and use them to bash ourselves over the head. So I think when we look at these teachings, it's really important to have an understanding of relative and ultimate, okay? So we live in the relative world. We have a relative self that functions until we're enlightened. That means we feel things, we suffer, we have happiness, hope and fear, joy and sorrow, we're sensitive, and we rely on the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, which is sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. And with the mind-body continuum in this life, we have a relative self. We may not have an ultimate, lasting, permanent, unchanging self, but that's a whole nother teaching. But, you know, this teaching is relative because we're living in the relative world for unenlightened beings. I'm not talking from an ultimate point of view. And it's good, you know, with Dharma to start from the ground up, because if you don't have basic self-love and self-care, how are you going to benefit others? You know, you're going to burn out very quickly because you're talking to others about being kind and compassionate, but you're not being kind and compassionate to yourself. So there's got to be a balance. When we talk about ego in Buddhism, we don't mean what they mean by ego in psychology, a sense of self. What we mean is a negative, self-grasping mind that misapprehends the nature of its existence and, you know, is driven by grasping to a permanent self and is ruled by negative emotions, you know. So obviously, even in psychology, we don't want to be ruled by negative emotions. But what psychology says is an ego and what Buddhism says is an ego is very different. So here, when we're talking about self-love, we don't mean self-obsession. We don't mean being selfish and disregarding the well-being of others. We don't mean being vain, being petty, being superficial, shallow. We just mean loving ourselves, appreciating our potential, rejoicing in our accomplishments, caring for ourselves so that we can live in a healthy way, so that we can continue to live a happy and peaceful life, and therefore become a refuge to ourselves and others. You know, because it's only when we have our basic needs met, basic level of happiness and well-being, that we can start to have energy to start working towards awakening. Otherwise, we're just struggling to survive every day, living in flight or fight mode. And we have very little to offer others, you know, let alone ourselves. So self-love is a choice. It's a way of relating to yourself that involves understanding your mistakes, understanding your losses, communicating with yourself about life without punishing yourself, without becoming bitter. Because we all know that life is full of ups and downs, bad things happen. We are all subject to karma, subject to birth, old age, sickness, and death. How can you communicate with yourself about life and not punish yourself? How can you develop self-love that is associated with handling stress in a better way, and recovering from stress in a better way? Because we also have trauma, and if you were raised by a stressed out parent or in poverty where you're that can form your early childhood flight or flight response, and a person who is raised with more of those stress hormones doesn't develop all the parts of their brain as well. So, that early childhood trauma can send us into being triggered, reliving traumatic events, so that we're rehashing the past and not really living in the present because we're triggered. We're constantly triggered in a flight or fight response. But there is a way to rewire our brain. That in itself is another talk as well. And that's probably something psychology can help you with as well. But there is a way to come back into alignment so that when you're triggered, when you're anxious, when you're feeling a sense of self-loathing, I'm not good enough, you're being carried away by your thoughts, you can come back into your body. You can feel your feelings, feel the sensation in your body. You can do a body scan, go through each part of your body for 5 minutes and breathe with that. What are these feelings? Just notice these feelings. Don't judge. Notice how they arise, abide, and dissolve without any judgment, because the body keeps the score. The body, trauma is hidden in the body as well as the mind and heart. So slowly, through observing sensations, through doing a body scan, we can come back to realignment. We can come back to a state of peace. We can learn to regulate our emotions. So self-love is also associated with a more optimistic outlook on life. So I say optimistic, I don't mean toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing, which is, bypassing difficult emotions, challenging conversations, conflict, or examining our baggage, using these spiritual teachings as a way to just say, I'm so peaceful, I don't really feel any of the painful and uncertain emotions of being a human being. I just mean a healthy, balanced view of life in the sense that you're able to put things in perspective. When something bad happens, okay, tomorrow is another day. A year ago, I didn't feel this way. Probably in another 6 months or a year, I also won't feel this way. You can put this difficult situation you're in into perspective. Whereas if you're someone who has low self-esteem, you're like, this bad thing happened, it's all my fault, I'm a crappy person, everybody hates me, I'm so worthless, I'm so useless, why can't I ever do anything right? And sometimes we've internalized the shame or the blame our parents put on us, teachers put on us, siblings put on us, bullies put on us. But in meditation, we need to kind of learn to examine these inner voices and see which ones we really need to listen to, which ones lead to happiness. And if we hear the voice of our internalized bully, our internalized shame, take the spindle off the record player and examine, do I need this? Is this useful for me anymore? Change the record. Sounds easy, but it's a lifetime of practice. Yeah, and self-esteem can also affect healthy behavior changes. Who you choose as a partner. If you think I'm not worth anything, I'm not beautiful, I'm not worthy of love, that will definitely affect who you choose as a partner, what kind of behavior you accept, whether you accept abuse or not. And if you get abused, it's not your fault, but if you have been in an abusive relationship, it's good to go for therapy before you engage in another relationship. And it's good to look at boundaries and self-worth and who and what you accept, and look at how, that narcissistic cycle of love, of someone love bombing you, and then the arguments and the blame and the toxic behavior and perhaps violence, and then, remorse and sorrow, and then the high of the love bombing again. Love as an addiction rather than love as a sharing your life with someone in a healthy, balanced way where you both have your own lives and are able to be self-regulating. You're not codependent. Self-esteem can also affect how we deal with the problems of life. Like I said, if you have low self-esteem, you tend to collapse in on yourself and blame yourself for everything that's going on. I mean, it's really interesting. When I first ordained as a nun, I would say I came from a family where women's potential, my father really respected women. Although, maybe he had some old-fashioned ideas that women shouldn't go into certain fields because they'd get sexually abused. But he really did have a respect for women and treated my mother with a great deal of respect. It was interesting when I became a Buddhist nun. At first it was like really wonderful and new, but then I realized I was coming up against this frustration, this glass ceiling. Like some older monks, male monks, would tell me, that is not for you, and I realized why I couldn't get access to teachings, why I couldn't get support as much as the monks, especially the Tibetan men, why I wasn't regarded with the same kind of support, or my potential wasn't honored, my labor wasn't honored, why I was expected to, clean the toilet, answer the phones, babysit children, even sell my own car to support the temple. Whereas, the Lama would never do that. He would never do any of those things except maybe answer the phone, because I was a woman, and because I wasn't Tibetan, I wasn't exotic, I wasn't so-called the real deal. And I realized that there is a certain stream of thought in certain Buddhist cultures or communities that it's seen as bad karma to be born as a woman. And for a while, I kind of internalized that, because I had so much faith in Buddhism, and Buddhism had made me really happy. Buddhism had given me a lot of the answers I'd been seeking. So I thought, well, if these other things are good, surely maybe what they're saying about women might be true as well, in some way. And I realized I was brainwashing myself, kidding myself, after years of working my butt off for this temple that didn't support me, and that I was taken for granted and not honored, that I was in an abusive relationship in a way with a group of people, not just one, and that's systemic patriarchy that women in the temple had internalized as much as the men. Women always turned up and cooked. Women always turned up and cleaned. Men didn't do that. Men just sat at the table and took the seat of honor and gave the speeches, And it's like, come on, it's Australia. It's not like medieval Tibet, but still we were perpetuating these cultural and patriarchal traditions and not questioning it, And if you do question it, nobody likes you anymore. They want you to go, But that's okay, because staying and conforming, accepting my, internalizing that patriarchy, being so down on myself, thinking I deserve that, to cooperate with dysfunction like that was cooperating in my own dehumanization. So examine situations where you're being taken advantage of, and honor yourself, honor your potential and your value as a woman, as a queer person, as a poor person, as a disabled person, as a person of color, as a man. So lack of self-love, children who don't receive love in the first 5 years of life don't handle things as well later on in life. They're less resilient. They're less likely to be healthy and form healthy relationships. That's not saying you can't. It's just, it sets them back, that they're not receiving the love as much or if their parent is in a state of flight or fight, or stress, or working really long hours and fighting poverty, doesn't have time to do certain things that help them develop their brain and develop their heart. It can lead to drug abuse, self-harm, eating disorders, being really hard on yourself. It's interesting, I was reading about narcissism, and I heard that one of the factors that produces a narcissist is parents that don't give you love or value you as a person, but only let you know that nothing less than perfection is acceptable, and only your achievements are valued, not you as a person. And I thought, what a horrible way to grow up. And the one person I know who is a narcissist is very much like that. She only valued people with money, people with high education, people who were good looking, and left everyone else around her feeling so empty and unappreciated. And I think it's really sad, because I think she herself probably felt unworthy and unappreciated, and didn't know how to love. So yeah, and this can come about through, this low self-esteem can come about through bad examples of people in our life, shame, rejection, trauma. There is a high amount of drug use in the queer community, and I think part of that is probably, a lot of queer people are rejected by their families, this and rejected by society. This hole of love, of that rejection is so strong. I'm not saying all queer people, I'm just saying some. So how do we overcome this? It's good to enter into a dialogue with your own heart. How am I feeling? Why do I feel this way? What is at the root of my dysfunctional and harmful behaviors? Why do I hate myself? Why do I feel I'm not good enough? Why do I accept abuse? Feel the feeling. Scan the body. If you were an outsider, how would you tell yourself to deal with this? Because sometimes our harshest critic is in our own head. What will it take for me to forgive myself? Ask yourself that. Make a conscious decision to speak kindly to yourself when you experience emotions. It's okay to feel bad sometimes. Life is not one happy ride in the sun. Life is full of ups and downs. Feelings come and go. But the key is to learn to sit with those feelings and not just act on them. Like, I feel bad, so I'm going to go on a bender. I feel bad, so I'm going to engage in reckless affairs. I feel ashamed or unaccepted, so I'm going to seek acceptance and recognition in the arms of someone else. Speak kindly to yourself, and set healthy boundaries. That means sometimes saying no. If you feel that you've done wrongs in the past, set those wrongs right as much as you can. Make time for yourself. Do things that make you happy, that are not harmful. And I suppose most of what I've said so far kind of comes from psychology more than Buddhism. But there are a few teachings in Buddhism that also, I think, increase self-love. And one of them is the practice of metta, the practice of loving kindness, and the Four Immeasurables. The Four Immeasurables are loving kindness, which is the wish that you be free of suffering, or happy. May you be happy. And then Maitri, or compassion, which is the wish that others and yourself be free of suffering. Because if you wish someone to be free of suffering, if you want to be happy, you also wish them to be free of suffering. Then there's mudita, which is rejoicing in the good fortune of others. If you look at Western newspapers and a lot of mainstream society pages, and the whole Western culture really isn't one of rejoicing, isn't it? It's more like tearing each other down, cancelling each other, ripping each other to shreds, you know, criticizing each other, being jealous of the things other people have. There's not a lot of rejoicing going on. Or maybe we rejoice in the wrong things, like, oh, she lost 20 kilos, so now she's a person we can treat as a full human being and not disrespect because she's no longer a fat woman. It's pretty sad, really. Someone got plastic surgery, they look 10 years younger, so now we'll give them respect. You know, we rejoice in the wrong things rather than look at this person who created a life-saving vaccine or drug, and they've made sure that they've kept hold of the patent themselves so that it will be free to people in developing countries. Or look at this amazing female scientist who developed who developed so many medical treatments, or this mathematician or scientist who developed all these inventions whose name we've never heard of because some guy stole her work. Look at this amazing woman who was a civil rights activist. Or, you know, look at this beautiful disabled person who created the most amazing music. You know, like there's so many silent heroes that we don't celebrate because they don't fit the narrow idea of beauty and success that we have. And then there is, so rejoicing means rejoicing in the good karma, the good deeds of yourself and others. You know, that's a wonderful thing. Like when you feel really low, when you feel like I'm a totally crap person, a waste of space, think about the good things you've done in your life. Even if you just get up every morning and feed a dog or a cat, you know, that's a wonderful act of charity. If you got sober, that's an amazing achievement. If you are a loving parent, even if you're not a perfect parent, you're a loving parent. Your kid is alive and feels loved at the end of the day, you're a good parent. If you're a loving partner, if you're a good school teacher, if you're a good nurse, if you're a good frontline worker who saves lives, you know, don't be so harsh on yourself and acknowledge the good things you've done. Rejoice in them. And then think about the good things that other people have done. People like Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. These are both men who also did not so good things in the past, but they also show none of us is perfect. But if we listen to the better angels among us, we can make a difference in the world. You know, rejoice in those things. Rejoice that even now in this crazy world, there are people working in a slum, feeding the hungry, counselors volunteering to stop people committing suicide on a suicide hotline where they don't get paid. There is a single mum pulling herself out of poverty, going for a master's degree. There is, you know, a man who has beaten his wife who realizes he has a problem and goes to anger counseling. There is someone trying to fix their marriage. There is someone, you know, giving $20 or $100 to a homeless person. There is someone building tiny homes for the homeless. There is, you know, some, very few sadly, but some politicians trying to change the system so that, you know, there's healthcare for all and there's affordable housing. There are artists creating beautiful, heartbreaking, inspiring pieces of art. There are people falling in love. There are little children playing in autumn leaves. There are dogs waiting by the door who are ecstatic to see their owners. There is the beautiful blue sky and the ancient, timeless white clouds. There is the snow-capped Himalayas. You know, so there is still all these good things, and all these good things still worth rejoicing in. You know, and this can give you, especially if you rejoice in your own good karma and the things that you've done, or the things that you want to do in the future. That can be a source of peace and joy, and you realize you're not as crap as you thought. And if you realize you totally are not the person you like to be, make a list about how you can change. You know, I mean, the first time the Buddha developed bodhicitta, great compassion, to liberate all beings from suffering, he was pulling a cart in hell. So in Buddhism, we have hell, but it's a mental state, but it's a realm people are born in. Whether you believe it or not doesn't really matter. Hell is here, isn't it? And his partner, who was also pulling the cart with him, fell down of exhaustion, and the demons beat him to death. And he just said, please stop, I'll pull the cart. And out of that great act of empathy, he was instantly reborn in the God realm. So, that was the first time when he developed bodhicitta, the wish to free others from suffering. So the Buddha was even once a person like that, There was a great disciple of the Buddha, Angulimala, who killed 100 people. I think it was 100, maybe more. A lot of people. And he was a notorious mass murderer. And he thought everybody was just kind of heartless, and they deserved to die. And the Buddha came across him and was not afraid and said, though the ocean of suffering is deep, look back and you'll see the shore. I know you possess goodness within you. And then Angulimala became a monk and got enlightened. So if someone like that, I think it was 999 people, maybe. Someone like that who killed that many people could become enlightened in one life. Most of us are nowhere near as bad as that. And the final of the 4 perfections, so there is loving kindness, compassion, rejoicing, and equanimity. So I probably should talk about loving kindness and compassion first. So loving kindness is, you just do this meditation where you imagine this beautiful golden light coming into your heart as if the sun is in your heart. And you feel a sense of warmth and unconditional love, a golden light flowing through you. And you just say to yourself, even though you're not perfect, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be peaceful and at ease, may I be filled with loving kindness and compassion. And you acknowledge the blessings of your life, that you're not as terrible as you think you are. You have Buddha nature, which is a more Mahayana concept. So the 4 Brahma Viharas, which I just talking about, is from the Theravada tradition of Buddhism. And the idea of Buddha nature is more of a Mahayana and Vajrayana concept. That everybody has the seed of awakening in them. That no matter how many lifetimes you've been born in an animal, you've been born in hell, you've just committed terrible karma, you've been a criminal, you've been a rapist, you've been a killer, that Buddha nature is always there. And that pure seed of potential of awakening for you to become a Buddha, for you to become a refuge to yourself and others, to purify your mind, which is originally good. That is what the Chinese symbol for human being means, originally good. That potential is always there. And all you need to do is sweep away the dust. There was once a monk who wasn't very smart, and he was a bit old when he ordained. He couldn't remember any of the sutras, and he couldn't fold his robes properly. He couldn't give Dharma talks, so all of the monks thought he was a bit useless. He couldn't remember one line of Dharma. And, he was asking the other monks for teachings, and they just got fed up because he couldn't retain anything. And he went to the Buddha and he said, Master, I have so much faith, but I'm not making progress and I can't remember anything. I'm too old. What should I do? And the Buddha said, my friend, you just take this broom and you sweep the temple every day, and you imagine that the temple, the floor is your mind. And as you sweep, you just follow your breath and be mindful in the present moment. And you imagine that the floor is your mind. You're making it luminous and clear. And you're sweeping away the dust of negative emotions and ignorance. Every day you just sweep and you stay in the present moment with your breath. You return to peace and original goodness. And you say to yourself, sweeping away the dust, sweeping away the dust. And that monk, unlike the many scholar monks who he'd been asking for teachings, became enlightened very quickly because he just was very simple. And he did it with so much devotion, returning to the present moment, sweeping away the dust. Buddha nature is there. Buddha nature is a refuge. Buddha nature is our human birthright. Buddha nature is the potential of every sentient being. Buddha nature is a return to the sacredness, a return to resting in peace that we can discover every day through our meditation practice. It's kind of really nice when you realize this inner ocean of peace, of everything you've been looking for, is not outside. It's not in you know, a, a better body or a better relationship or a bigger house or a nicer car, you know, because most of us have had at least some form of those outer trappings, and it's nice for a while, but it doesn't bring lasting satisfaction. It always changes. But looking inside, looking at the, you know, clearing away the dust inside, that inner wealth, whatever progress, whatever you invest in your heart and developing your mind and your heart, that progress will never, it will never go back. You know, that seed, every seed of Dharma you plant is not a seed wasted. Whereas the effort you make in worldly things, although it's nice, and of course we all need a basic standard of living, everything always changes. It's just a process. It's like being in a boat with a lot of holes in it, and you're just throwing out the water, you know, and it never ends. This kind of vicious cycle of survival and creating new, better, bigger, more responsibility, you know. Whereas when you plant Dharma, that those roots are very deep, you know, and the results of that is so profound, that it's never wasted. You know, I used to go to work for an insurance company and I'd come home feeling exhausted and I'd feel like that was just a waste of my day, you know. That's another day I'm never going to get back, and who knows when I'll die, you know. Whereas as a nun working in the Indian slum, I never felt I'm wasting my life, I'm wasting a precious day. You know, when I meditate, I never feel, well, that was an hour I'm never going to get back, unless my mind is particularly deluded that day. Okay, so metta is, you say that, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be peaceful and at ease, and you're wishing yourself to be well and happy. It's a sense of rejoicing in the goodness of yourself and life. So first you do it for yourself, then you do it and you do it for maybe 2 minutes, and you kind of fake it till you make it. You recognize, I do have some basic good qualities. And then you do it for someone who's close to you, like your mother, your father, grandmother, your dog, doesn't matter who. Maybe not your romantic partner, just for the sake of simplicity. Then you send them the blessings of your life. You send them the golden light and the good energy. You do that for 2 minutes. And then you go on to someone who you don't know, like like you don't know them well. You're neither attached nor have aversion towards them. Like, you know, the person you met in the supermarket at the checkout, or the person who pumps your petrol, or the person in the grocery shop who sells you vegetables. You know, imagine what their life is like and know they're a human being just like you, who feels hope and pain and fear and sorrow. Imagine the secret universe they inhabit and empathize with them and wish them well. You know, because friends become strangers, strangers become friends, friends become enemies. This is just a label we put on people. It's not inherently who they are. And then finally, we do it for someone we find very challenging. Doesn't mean that we necessarily accept their abuse or their bad behavior. It's always a good idea to protect yourself from abuse and to set healthy boundaries. But what it means is we're not carrying hatred in our heart, and we have empathy for why that person is the way they are, which is usually to do with trauma and a lack of love, you know, a lack of good human relating skills, a lack of early childhood development. Sometimes people are just evil, you know, because it's profitable, but they create so much suffering, you know. And you send them loving kindness or transformation. So Maitri is the next step, which is, I wish you to be happy, but I also wish you to be free of suffering. And compassion is the next step. Compassion is a verb, you know, because if you want someone to be happy, you also have to address the causes of their suffering, which is usually to do with systemic injustice, you know. Like I see you know, there's been an attack on Asian women. And, you know, racism, you know, and last year and earlier this year, it was Black men and police violence, you know. So systemic racism is a massive problem, a massive cause of suffering. You know, gender inequality is one of the biggest causes of suffering and injustice and poverty in the world. You know, the brutality of which we raise our young men causing suicide, and unhealthy masculinity creates a lot of suffering both for men and women, and non-binary people.